In Farmville, Virginia, there's an abandoned mansion that dates all the way back to the mid-1700s. The Dunnington Mansion is an iconic piece of history to Virginia. And last summer, I had the opportunity to interview so many people that have wonderful stories and memories about this forgotten gem. So sit back and relax as we unveil the untold stories of the Dunnington Mansion from over the last 300 years. Once a stately and beautiful manor, Dunnington Mansion, known locally as Poplar Hill, has an extensive and rich history. Located in Farmville, Virginia, adjacent to a championship golf course, it currently sits abandoned, slowly decaying and losing its shine to the elements and the passage of time. Broken and all but forgotten, this rare gem is threatened by woeful neglect. If immediate action is not taken, this amazing piece of architecture might soon be lost forever. But it wasn't always this way. The history of this amazing place stretches back almost 300 years. The original land grant was awarded to Richard Woodson by King George II in 1748. Woodson named the property Poplar Hill. In 1775, the property was willed to Richard's daughter, Agnes, and her husband, Francis Watkins. Later, in 1826, it was passed to Francis's daughter, Frances, and her husband, James D. Wood. James and Frances are credited with building the original brick portion of the house. In 1860, the property was sold to John Hughes Knight Jr., a captain in the Confederate Army, ending Poplar Hill's 100-plus year history in the Woodson-Watkins-Wood family.
My great-great-grandfather bought the place right before the Civil War. At that time, my great-grandmother was 4 years old. And by the time the Civil War ended, she was 8 years old and could remember the Civil War in a child's sort of format. She would tell some stories. Notably, she told one about the Union troops coming into the place, and I believe it was part of Sheridan's division. Our family was terrified. The ice house that sits to the left of the home was where they hid silver, but all they wanted to do is get something to eat.
32 years later, Captain Knight passed the property to his daughter India and her husband Walter Dunnington. In 1897, Mr. Dunnington extensively renovated the house, creating the glorious mansion that is seen today. He added 4 rooms, a master tower, and a stately front entrance. Dunnington wanted to create a beautiful home in a style more commonly found in cities of that time. It represented his prestigious status in the tobacco trade of the late 1800s.
The Dunningtons are what most people know in the whole area here because there's still a lot of survivors from that time period when they still owned the house. When the Dunningtons came in here, Mr. Dunnington was in the tobacco business.
He owned warehouses in Farmville, and he brokered and shipped the high-quality tobacco all over the world. Tobacco was a hugely important industry for Virginia and for the heart of Virginia.
I used to work at the old Dunnington Beach tobacco factory in Farmville just before it had closed, and it was noticing at the time clock there was this big box over in the corner, and on top was a tray cut about that deep full of old papers related to this. And I kept looking at it and thought, it's cool and all. And then one day, came back from lunch, the box was gone. And I asked, what happened to the box? Oh, they're taking it to the dump now. So I ran outside and managed to get them not to take them to the dump, but put them on the back of my truck. And then over the years, I have looked at these things, kind of processed them, put them in chronological order, and a good number of them were actually on display or deposited at the Virginia Historical Society for 24 years.
All the cool stories came from talking to the Dunnington relatives. They have all of the wonderful anecdotes about being children and growing up here.
My perspective was it was like Disney World, that you drive down the road lined with poplar trees and you come to the final clearing and this huge mansion was there. Grandfather was Granny, is what we called her, son. He built Dunnington's. He lived here in Farmville and he ran the tobacco warehouse. His daughter, Catherine, was my mother.
I think I have a very good relationship with the people out here and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a magnificent house in those days.
I also remember Granny shooting craps and winning most of the time.
I can see her right now. She would be leaning over, and she was 90 plus years old, and she would shoot her shot and pull the leg up and go again. I mean, she was leaning over a chair that I couldn't do.
Today,
the people who worked there knew who we were. We're very good to us, very tolerant of us. I was fascinated by the milking of the cows, and I can remember one day that whoever was doing it said, well, you want to give it a try? And, you know, I'm sitting there watching him go like this. I said, sure. So they let me get in there. It wasn't nearly as easy as what he made it look like.
The Dunnington family had a large number of employees who both lived and worked on the estate. Francis Dowler held the important position of farm manager, and his wife, Dora, was Mr. Dunnington's personal nurse as he battled cancer. Mr. Lester Bigger worked as India Dunnington's butler and chauffeur for many years, and, as were many of Poplar Hill's employees, was very dear to the family. His famous recipe for beaten biscuits lives on to this day, and they are still made by the Dunnington relatives.
I would be remiss if I didn't talk about how lovely and wonderful all the employees that worked were to all of the family members, and how much that we loved them, and they would hug and kiss on you, and they were just a big part of the family.
As it stands today, I think it has a historical importance that future generations will know that people 200 years ago had big plantations. They self-sustained on their own farms, took care of their families and their workers. I think it's just a monument to the people who lived many years ago here in Farmville, and they pretty much set the example for other people in this town.
The stories that are told about Mr. and Mrs. Dunnington are all of them being extremely caring people. Race relations on the Dunnington property were very progressive for the time. So it's one thing to have stories. It's another thing to see the photographs.
I think it's important to tell those stories, to discover who lived here, who worked here. We know that individuals were enslaved here. So how do we talk about that, not just throughout the mansion, but even in this community? I'm always interested in every space about the humanity of a space. Who are the families? Who are the children? What did they do on a daily basis?
After his death in 1922, Walter left the house to his wife, India, where she resided until she passed away at the age of 103.
How beautiful of a life it must have been to live here for 99 years, and what a property it must be to never want to leave.
I think it's beautiful what you see from the front, not knowing what was inside, which is even more fantastic. I mean, the moldings, the entry hall from 1897, you just don't see that type of woodwork, that type of terracotta work, and there's nothing like it around. I mean, it's sort of one of a kind. The workmanship throughout this house, the double parlor doors here, very typical, but beautifully paneled.
One thing that really captured my eye is the amount of detail they have along the doors, the fireplaces, and really the marble around the fireplaces themselves. They look brand new.
The mansion's modern history starts in 1960 after India Knight Dunnington passed away. The property was then auctioned and purchased by Glenn K. Bolt, and the land was turned into a working cattle farm.
My father came to me, I was 17, and he came to me and said, come on, why don't you go for a ride with me? So he brought me out here and showed me around and everything. He asked me, he says, what are you going to do when you get out of school? I said, I don't know. He said, I got a proposition for you then. He said, this place is up for sale. And I said, if I stay home and help him with it, he'll see if he'd buy it. But if I wasn't going to stay home and help him with it, he wasn't going to fool with it. And so at 17, I set my career right there. I told him I'd stay home and helping with it. And then he said, okay, let's go talk to your mother, see what she says about it. So we went and talked to her and told her about it. And her comment was, by these we do go broke, we'll start all over again.
Many barns and outbuildings were also added to the property. The Balts also made many upgrades to the house, including modernizing the electric and plumbing and converting the heating system from coal to oil. They also renovated the inside of the house, restoring the beauty that had faded as India aged.
My mother really had pride in the house when she was younger, and she did up till she got older. She cleaned this house by herself twice a week. We was talking one time, and she said she could walk through this house with no lights on and not hit any of the furniture. She knew it so well.
Nelson inherited the property from his parents, and in 1999, he was approached by a group of local investors in the County Community Development Authority. They had been eyeing the property to create a championship-level golf course in Farmville.
One of the investors kind of asked me, what would it take for me to move? And I more or less says, I like it here. You know, I'm not interested in moving. So we finally set a price on it. Behold, I didn't think they'd take me up on it, but they did.
When the Bolts sold it, their understanding was that a championship golf course was going to be built on the property, and that this mansion was going to be the shining jewel. It was going to be the inn and conference center and restaurant for this wonderful golf course that was going to come to Farmville.
Unfortunately, the money dried up for the CDA after the golf course was constructed in 2004. Part of the property, including the mansion, was foreclosed on and bought up by another investment group.
They found out that nobody could get possession of the house, whether because of the bank or whatever. I wasn't involved in, the best thing, I wasn't involved in negotiations to see if they could get the house back. My main involvement was overseeing the construction of a temporary building to be the clubhouse for check-in with restrooms to be able to open the business as soon as possible so that we could find some way to generate revenue, as the CDA was a not-for-profit entity that was involved in building the golf course.
This important landmark that has stood proudly for 3 centuries and has been loved for so long is now facing its hardest trial, the tragic results of abandonment.
Unfortunately, a Band-Aid wasn't applied when it could have really saved or extended the life of this home.
So you have an obvious distinction between older and newer.
The infection has taken over. The water drip, that's probably a small portion of the roof was lost, and it could have been stabilized much earlier, and the estate would not be in the state that it is.
I assume they sold it several times, and the owners that bought it let the house go. Never maintained it, never did anything to it. They didn't want to spend any money on it, I guess. If they had maintained it when we left here, just yearly maintain it, it wouldn't have cost that much, and it would still be in good shape, because it was in good shape when we left. And that's what hurts me more than anything, is what we had pride in and maintained it and fixed it up. And then they just let it go down like they did.
The mansion was left neglected, and for the past 2 decades, the once beautiful home has been slowly rotting with no one to look after it, and its history is becoming nothing more than an echo on the wind.
When I put aside the sadness of seeing the destruction and try to look beyond it to how it was before for the families that grew up in the older portion of the home, and then for the families from when the Dunningtons built the newer portion on forward, it's beautiful and it's happy and it's warm feeling, but you have to see beyond how it is now.
The house itself has deteriorated dramatically because there was no upkeep, and also it became an opportunity, I think, for people to scavenge and take things out of here. After the CDA sold the golf course and the property that they owned, the group that bought that had made some plans to do some work in here, but nothing came to fruition, and the house just continued to erode.
It really was eye-opening when they came here and saw
how much of the home was damaged in a very short amount of time. I think it was less than 20 years. And what amount of money it's going to take and the right person for it.
All hope is not lost, though. Virginia native Heather Beach started the Dunnington Mansion Foundation, a nonprofit that hopes to preserve the history by raising awareness and the funds to help save this incredible property.
When I saw the pictures on the internet, I knew I had to do something. I got tired of reading 700 comments on one of Ryan's pictures posts of, "This is so sad. Why does this happen? Why doesn't somebody save it? How did it get this way?" And I felt compelled to do something. That's why I decided to form the nonprofit. I figured our best shot at doing something was to form a nonprofit, because at least at the very basic level, if we were to find donors, if we had some sort of incentive for them to donate to us, and some sort of protection that those funds were in the hands of a nonprofit.
Every penny that's needed goes to it, period. Even like building upon what's already here. Not even just the house, but the grounds and the sustainability.
We did our very first historical tour. It was a historical tour of the outside of the house. It was a self-guided tour of the inside of the house, but we also had a special program that we kicked it off with at the Longwood Library, where the Dunnington relatives all spoke about their memories. And the repeated theme was Christmas.
Well, the Christmases, as I remember it, had to get all dressed up. And again, I'm a small child and wearing a coat and tie, which I didn't like, trying to play. And Christmas dinner, as I remember, you had lines of tables and you had a hierarchy of where you got to sit. And of course, I never got past the children's table, which was the card table at the very end, almost in the kitchen.
And so what we decided to do was decorate the one room that they said the Christmas tree was always in. We put up a Christmas tree and we made copies and cut out Dunnington family photos, a lot of them of Christmases, and we decorated the tree with that. And that was amazing to me because that house kind of felt happy.
Preservationists and other concerned citizens of Virginia are fighting to keep the history of this mansion alive and searching for someone that can be the savior of this beautiful home.
Now, like most people, I'd probably written it off, really. You know, there's nothing I can do. But here comes Heather Beach. Mercy, I just cannot tell you what a job she's done at whipping this into a wildfire, practically. If this could be preserved somehow, used as a bed and breakfast, a small hotel, private residence would be wonderful. Farmville is a great community for you to come and live in.
100% I see the potential for investment in Farmville. I think one of the strengths of Farmville is the fact we have two universities here, right? They've kind of come together to help save the golf course that we're right next to here. And there is some money in Farmville, right? There's some history here and a lot of other people. So I think if this place can come back, I think it could do quite well. And I think it could be a signature place for Farmville.
I look at Preservation Virginia as an organization that mediates and helps to navigate an organization or individual through the historic preservation process.
And I truly think that it would make a gorgeous little bed and breakfast on a golf course. I think that there could be a sitting area to sit and enjoy a book early in the morning by the greenhouse. And I think there's space to, you know, have a brunch outdoors in the back, you know, have a patio or something. I would love it to be a place where even if people couldn't come and stay here overnight or something, that it could be a facility where people could come and spend time.
A lot of people talk about that, the economic value. That seems, especially in the last few years, that has been the main, value of preservation. Look at the economics. Looking at tax credits, it's going to help increase the value. But I think, people kind of forget how important memory is and how historic places. If you leave home and you're gone for 10 years, then you come back, the memories come flooding back in, and how important that is to people.
The most dangerous thing that could happen to this place is that we turn it into a venue that can't support itself. And if the money runs out and it can't support itself, then it's going to end up abandoned again, and we'll be right back where we started. So our ideal business model would be to approach these investors and say, partner with us, in raising money to restore the mansion. Or the other way that we could do it is we could raise all of the money. So the mansion would be 100% restored by the foundation. And then we would lease it out to somebody who wants to do a wedding venue, a photographer who wants an event center, to somebody who wants a restaurant, or a combination of all of those people. So that lease money would be what would support the mansion going forward.
It would be an awesome dream to hear wedding guests talk about the venue.
Every time it's done work, changes are made to the better. It could be an asset to the town.
It's got bones like you wouldn't believe. It's solid. And I think the community at the same time understands the importance of what this building and this land mean to the area. And being able to bring it back to its luster, bring it back to its heyday, revive it and help it grow, also means that the community grows too.
I'm optimistic. For one reason, everybody I have talked to in the development business told me that that is a jewel of the place. And if you want to have a planned residential community, it is very important to get that house back like it was and be a drawing card.
I would love to see it be a house that all people could use, because I would really want to turn it into a cultural and educational center. I mean, this is one of Virginia's historic gems.
Every day, people are working to keep this abandoned mansion alive. As the story of Dunnington Mansion unfolds, we reach a pivotal moment. This landmark, rich in history and potential, stands at the crossroads of preservation and loss. We invite those with passion for heritage and vision for incorporating history and business to join us in reviving this architectural gem. Investment is not just in the brick and mortar, but in a legacy that enriches humanity's future. Please consider being a part of this transformation, where history is honored and new possibilities are embraced. Together, let's turn Dunnington Mansion into a beacon of restored beauty and cultural pride. Just because it's abandoned doesn't mean it's the end of its story. Being able to work with the Dunnington Mansion Foundation and Heather Beach has been an absolute honor, and they even gave me this beautiful mug that helps represent what the mansion is, so hopefully a restoration is in the near future. Until the next video, keep exploring.